You are standing in the middle of a conflict, your heart rate violently spiking, desperately wasting your breath, trying to prove a logical point to someone who is entirely committed to misunderstanding you. You believe that winning this argument and getting the last word will finally give you closure and peace. But the hidden reality is that your constant need to debate is actively feeding their biological addiction to chaos. Today, we will decode the psychology of people who never argue, revealing how absolute silence is not a sign of submission, but a highly sophisticated biological firewall designed to starve emotional vampires of your sacred energy. We exist in a deeply reactionary society that has conditioned you to believe that every single accusation requires a defense, and every provocation requires an immediate response. From a very young age, you are taught that defending your honor, explaining your perspective, and fighting back verbally is a universal sign of strength. You watch political debates, social media arguments, and reality television, subconsciously absorbing the toxic idea that the person who speaks the loudest and gets the final word is the ultimate victor. Because of this conditioning, you treat your attention and your emotional energy as if they are worthless currencies, handing them out freely to anyone who challenges you. When a coworker makes a passive-aggressive comment, when a family member criticizes your life choices, or when a stranger leaves a hateful remark online, your immediate biological instinct is to step into the arena. You want to correct the record. You want to force them to see the truth. You want justice. But this relentless pursuit of being right is a catastrophic drain on your nervous system. You spend hours, sometimes days, having imaginary arguments in the shower, rehearsing the perfect comeback, and letting the toxic words of deeply flawed individuals occupy premium real estate in your mind. You are constantly exhausted, and you cannot figure out why. The truth is, you are experiencing severe cognitive depletion because you are fighting invisible wars that have absolutely zero impact on your actual survival. Listen to me very carefully. The individuals who operate at the highest level of psychological mastery have realized a fundamental biological truth. Human anger carries a massive, measurable metabolic cost. Every time you engage in an argument, your body undergoes a severe physiological transformation. Your amygdala perceives the verbal insult as a literal physical threat to your life. It immediately hijacks your prefrontal cortex, the logical, rational part of your brain, and floods your entire bloodstream with cortisol and adrenaline. Your heart rate accelerates, your blood pressure spikes, your vision narrows, and your muscles tense up. Your body is physically preparing to fight a predator in the jungle, but you are just standing in a kitchen arguing over a minor inconvenience. Generating and sustaining this level of physiological arousal requires a massive amount of glucose and neural energy. When you argue, you are literally burning the fuel that you need to build your empire, solve complex problems, and elevate your life. The masters of human behavior understand that their energy is strictly finite. They view engaging in a petty argument not as a matter of pride, but as an incredibly poor biological investment. When someone attempts to provoke them, they look at the situation with cold clinical detachment and realize that their brain simply refuses to finance the ego trip of a lesser mind. While 95% of the population willingly hands over their emotional regulation to anyone who insults them, you join the quiet, sovereign minority who absolutely refuses to participate. You realize that your peace of mind is an elite fortress, and you deny access to anyone who has not earned the right to be inside. To achieve this level of dominance, you must deeply understand the psychological profile of the person trying to provoke you. When someone constantly picks fights, makes snide remarks, or drags you into endless, circular debates, they are not actually looking for a resolution. They do not care about the facts, and they certainly do not care about understanding your perspective. What they are experiencing is an internal state of severe emotional dysregulation. They are miserable, chaotic, and fundamentally empty. Because they lack the psychological tools to soothe their own anxiety or process their own pain, they must project that chaos outward. They are emotional vampires, and they use arguments as a mechanism to extract a reaction from you. Your anger, your frustration, and your desperate attempts to explain yourself act as a dark, twisted form of validation for them. It proves to them that they have power. It proves that they exist and that they can manipulate your internal state. When you argue back, you are giving them exactly what they want. You are taking their toxic, radioactive waste and voluntarily injecting it into your own nervous system. But here is where the illusion completely shatters. Here is where we must confront the darkest reality of why you constantly fall into this trap. You tell yourself a very noble lie about why you argue. You tell yourself that you are standing up for yourself. You believe that you are defending the truth, protecting your boundaries, and ensuring that you are not being taken advantage of. You think that if you explain your side perfectly, clearly, and logically, the other person will suddenly experience a massive awakening, apologize for their behavior, and change their ways. You are completely lying to yourself. The painful truth is that you do not argue because you are seeking justice. You argue because your ego is incredibly fragile and you are deeply addicted to external validation. Subconsciously, you feel invisible. You harbor a terrifying, silent fear that you do not matter, and you use conflict as a desperate tool to force other people to acknowledge your existence. You need the toxic person to understand you because, deep down, you do not fully understand yourself. You are outsourcing your self-worth to the exact individuals who are actively trying to destroy it. Every time you stay up late writing a long, emotional paragraph to someone who disrespected you, you are not establishing a boundary. You are begging for a negotiation. You are pleading with an emotional terrorist to validate your reality. Your future self is standing in the room right now, looking at you with profound disappointment, watching you sacrifice your dignity and drain your life force just to win a meaningless verbal ping-pong match against someone who fundamentally hates themselves. By constantly arguing, you are proving that you are just as dysregulated as they are. You have allowed their sickness to become your sickness. Let the average individual drown in their desperate need to be right. You are not a rehabilitation center for broken people who refuse to take accountability, and you are certainly not a public defender for your own ego. By walking away from the provocation without a single word, you forge an iron soul while others allow themselves to be easily manipulated. Once you accept this brutal reality, you must implement the ultimate psychological protocol used by those who fiercely protect their energy. In clinical psychology, this is known as the gray rock method. It is a behavioral strategy designed to extinguish the toxic behavior of emotional vampires by depriving them of their primary fuel source, your reaction. Think of how a predator operates in the wild. A predator is attracted to movement, panic, and resistance. If the prey screams and fights, the predator's instinct is triggered and the attack intensifies. But if the prey suddenly turns into a cold, uninteresting, immobile gray rock, the predator becomes confused. There is no thrill, there is no feedback loop. The predator eventually gets bored and wanders off to find an easier target. When you apply the gray rock protocol to human interactions, you deliberately become the most uninteresting, unresponsive, and emotionally flat person in the room. When the toxic individual throws an insult, launches an accusation, or tries to drag you into a chaotic debate, you do not defend yourself. You do not explain your actions. You do not attack them back. You simply look at them with a blank clinical stare. You offer zero facial expressions. If you are forced to speak, you use short, non-committal phrases. You say, okay. You say, I understand you feel that way. You say, we will have to agree to disagree. And then you fall completely silent. This absolute lack of reaction is devastating to the manipulator. It deprives them of the emotional dopamine hit they were desperately seeking. It forces them to sit alone with their own toxicity, unable to offload it onto you. At first, they will likely escalate their behavior. They will say more outrageous things, hoping to finally crack your armor and drag you down into the mud. But if you hold the line, if you remain an impenetrable, silent rock, their behavior will eventually extinguish. They will realize that your emotional grid is entirely locked down, and they do not have the security clearance to access it. Mastering the art of not arguing requires a profound shift in how you perceive power. The weak mind believes that power is aggressive. The weak mind believes that power is shouting the loudest, dominating the conversation, and forcing submission through verbal barrage. But the psychology of those who never argue reveals that true power is entirely quiet. True power is sovereign. It is the absolute, unshakable knowing of who you are, which requires zero validation from external sources. When you refuse to argue, you are executing the ultimate power dynamic. You are silently communicating to the other person that their words are fundamentally irrelevant to your reality. You are showing them that you are the architect of your own emotional state, and they are merely a guest who is about to be evicted. You observe their chaos, their insults, and their desperate attempts to trigger you, but you do not absorb it. You let it pass right through you, like wind through a hollow tree. You remain physically present, but psychologically, you are untouchable. This level of emotional detachment is not easy to achieve. It requires you to sit with the extreme discomfort of being misunderstood. It requires you to swallow your pride and let the other person believe they have won. But this discomfort is the exact training ground where unbreakable resilience is forged. Every time you bite your tongue, every time you choose silence over the cheek thrill of a comeback, you are building thick, neurological calluses around your mind. You are proving to your own nervous system that you are safe, that you are in control, and that you do not need anyone else to validate your truth. You have two distinct paths laid out before you right now. You can continue to live as a slave to your ego. You can keep stepping into the arena with emotional vampires, trading your sacred energy for the hollow, fleeting satisfaction of proving a point. You can remain constantly exhausted, easily provoked, and endlessly distracted by the noise of people who do not matter. Or you can build the firewall. You can step out of the arena entirely. You can realize that silence is the most terrifying weapon you possess against those who seek to drain you. You can starve the chaos, protect your metabolic energy, and use that fuel to build a life so magnificent that the opinions of lesser minds simply cease to exist. The choice is entirely yours. But remember, every second you spent arguing is a second of your life you are never getting back. While others scream into the void demanding to be heard, you anchor into quiet sovereignty. While others react to chaos, you respond with clinical detachment. That is not weakness. That is evolution, and evolution is the quiet superpower that separates the fragmented from the unshakable. If you are ready to claim that sovereignty, subscribe to Stoic Fortitude. Check the description for the clinical tools that will help you build your mental framework, protect your energy, master your silence. See you in the next protocol.